Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Natalia Leigh. I'm an indie author and full-time freelance editor, and this is the third video in my brand new series for writers focusing on super easy tips to improve your writing and improve your storytelling. So we've already discussed dialogue tags and lists, and you'll be able to find those two videos in the playlist linked down below this video. Today we are talking about something that I have wanted to discuss for a while, and that is head hopping in your fiction. So if you've heard of the term head hopping, maybe an editor or a beta reader has told you that you're head hopping and you want to learn a little bit more about it, what it is, maybe some tips for how to avoid it, then just keep watching. Let's get started. Okay, so first things first, what is head hopping? Head hopping it's relatively simple, but it can also get confusing. So we'll kind of touch on both of those. The simple definition of head hopping is when you slip from your main viewpoint character's head into another character's head, hence the term head hopping. You are jumping around from one character's head and POV to another character's head and POV, and this can get really confusing for readers. It can even become frustrating when they are having a difficult time keeping track of whose head they're in at any given time. Now, some of the confusion with this term head hopping comes in when we start discussing narration, and especially third person limited versus like a third person omniscient. So this is, I would call this a more like advanced writing and storytelling topic or skill. But the difference between head hopping versus third person omniscient narration is, one, your like intention. A third person omniscient narration, that is something that the author intends to do. They are doing this carefully and selectively, versus head hopping tends to be an accident. Authors don't mean to head hop. So that's one thing. The second thing is voice. Who is telling the story? So in an omniscient story, you have an omniscient narrator, right? So the narrator who is telling the story knows everything. They know things that happened in the past. They know it's happening for literally everyone in the present. They know what's going to happen in the future. They are all knowing, hence the term omniscient. Now, this omniscient narrator is going to tell the story in a single voice, that narrator's voice. That varies from a third person limited, sometimes called like a up close or close third narration. Yes, we're using similar words that an omniscient narrator would use. He or she did this versus I did this, but the voice is going to be different. So if you have a close third or third person limited narration, we can switch viewpoint characters selectively, right? And as we switch through those viewpoint characters, those characters are telling the story in their own voice. So let's say you have two characters. Let's say you're writing a romance, a third person POV limited romance, and you have the hero and the heroine, let's say. Now you're gonna switch back and forth with these two viewpoint characters. These two characters are going to be very different from each other. They have different life experiences and they have different voices. So when this character is telling the story, they're gonna tell it with their voice. When this character is telling the story, they're telling it in their voice. So that's still going to be third person limited narration, and we're switching off viewpoint characters, and they have their own voices telling the story. With the omniscient narrator, it is one narrator who knows everything, and they tell it in one voice, regardless of which character they're talking about or the events that they're covering and narrating to the reader. So I apologize if that's a little bit confusing. If you want a video dedicated specifically to third person limited versus an omniscient narration style, please let me know down below. I really hope I haven't confused you here. So that's the difference between third person limited, and third person omniscient. And I feel like that is really important for you to know in order to understand head hopping and why it is not the same thing as omniscient narration. All right, so what we are going to do is take a look at an example from my book, Pistol Daisy. I'm going to read you a little excerpt, and then I edited it a little bit to put in a head hopping error. So let's start with this example. Here we go. So this first example does not contain any head hopping, and Pistol Daisy is written in first person present tense POV, so Daisy is the one telling the story. Here we go. I hold out my hand. Daisy Allen. Then I smirk. But you knew that already. The man puts his hand in mine and gives it a rough shake. Henry McLeod. But you still ain't coming. So that is an excerpt from Pistol Daisy. Again, that's told in first person present tense POV, and it can be a little bit more difficult. It's not as easy to head hop in a first person POV narration. It tends to be much easier to head hop in a third person POV. But in this next example that I kind of edited and I'm gonna read here for you, this shows how you can still head hop in a first person POV. So here we go. I hold out my hand. Daisy Allen. Then I smirk. But you knew that already. The man considers what I said and wonders if he's making a bad choice by getting involved with me. Finally, he puts his hand in mine and gives it a rough shake. Henry McLeod. But you still ain't coming. So in this second example, I have highlighted for you the sentence where the head hopping occurs. So we are supposed to be in Daisy's head. She is telling the story and she only knows what she is thinking and feeling. She's not a mind reader. She's no Edward Cullen, okay? So this sentence, it says, the man considers what I said and wonders if he's making a bad choice by getting involved with me. Daisy has no way of knowing what is going through Henry's head, so she cannot communicate to the reader that he's wondering if he's making a bad choice. All she can do is watch him, read his body language, and listen to what he says. That's the only way she can come to an understanding of what he is thinking and feeling. So this is a great example of how even in first person POV, you can still have head hopping issues. Okay, so now that I have kind of gone over the difference between head hopping and omniscient narration, and I've showed you a couple of examples, I have a few tips that I hope are going to help you. Number one, find the head hopping issues within your story, better understand head hopping, and hopefully get rid of it so that you're really staying up close third, or even close first person close-up POV with your main viewpoint character. All right, first tip, it's gonna be super simple. Keep focused on one character's POV at a time. Tip two, building off of that, keep in mind once you've already established who your viewpoint character is, that unless they can read minds, like Edward Cullen, unless they can read minds, they cannot know what another character is thinking or feeling. And like I said about Daisy and Henry in this scene, they have to pay close attention to what other characters are saying and doing in order to come to an understanding of what that other character is feeling. It's just like us and what we experience in daily life when we are talking to somebody. Let's say we are meeting somebody for the first time. As we are having a conversation with them, not only are we listening to what that person is saying to us, but we are watching their body language, and we can tell based on that body language what that person is feeling, right? So we have to pay close attention to what the other characters are doing and saying in order to understand and interpret those things. But the character cannot know for certain. They cannot say, here's what this other character is thinking or wondering or feeling, etc., right? That would be hopping into another head. That would be head hopping. Tip number three, if you absolutely need for your story, for tension, action, whatever, if you need to switch to another POV, or maybe you're writing a multi-POV story, it's best to make that switch at a logical point in the story. And by logical, I mean this is usually going to be after a section break or when a new chapter starts, right? So that makes logical sense to the reader because they know, all right, there is a break in the story here. Now either we're jumping forward in time, maybe we're even jumping back in time. This is a good place for a new viewpoint character to step in, and then they can better get settled into that viewpoint versus it happening mid-scene, mid-paragraph, or mid-sentence. So if you know that you need to switch viewpoint characters, it'd be a good idea to do that at a scene break or after a scene break, or when you start a new chapter. Now, of course, I cannot talk about head hopping. Personally, I feel I would be doing you a disservice talking about head hopping without mentioning show versus tell. I need to do a video on this so badly, and I'm probably gonna say that in every single video I film until I film my show versus tell video. But I see a lot of beginner writers struggle with head hopping because they are simultaneously struggling with show versus tell. Now, this goes back to context clues, reading, understanding, interpreting body language, dialogue, what other characters are saying and doing in order to come to a conclusion about what they're thinking or feeling. So when a writer does not know how to show what is happening and they have to tell what is happening, that can often lead to head hopping, because they might say, okay, I am in Daisy's point of view and I need to somehow communicate to readers that Henry is feeling very hesitant in this moment. He's not really sure if he should be revealing personal information about himself to Daisy. If I am a really beginner writer and I don't know how to show Henry's hesitancy, I don't know how to show that he's really feeling kind of uncomfortable and nervous about the situation, I might just tell you. And by jumping into his head, I can easily tell you Henry was feeling nervous about this. Or, like this sentence I wrote, he considers what I said and wonders if he's making a bad choice. So if I don't know how to show the reader that Henry is feeling these things, I could easily head hop and start telling the reader that Henry is feeling these things. So head hopping problems can be a result of a bigger issue that is not knowing how to show and therefore resulting to telling. So please do keep that in mind. And I guess the last thing to say to kind of wrap this up is, why do you want to avoid head hopping in the first place? Of course, you can do this in your books if you want to. Many of these guidelines surrounding storytelling are just that. They're guidelines, they're not hard and fast rules. But head hopping, like I said earlier, can really confuse your reader. When I am editing for writers who consistently head hop, it is very easy, even as an editor, to get confused, and then I have to go back and reread things in order to understand whose POV we've jumped into, especially when there's no scene break and we don't have a chapter break. And when we're writing books and we are publishing books, we are doing so, one, for ourselves because we enjoy it and we feel fulfilled, but two, because we want the reader to enjoy it. We want the reader to fall in love with our story and with our characters, and they want to have a fully immersive experience. And when you are head hopping all over the place and the reader, even when they are an intelligent and practiced reader, if you are head hopping all over the place, they can get confused and they can get frustrated, and then they can close your book, put it down, and pick up a book that doesn't have head hopping and POV issues. So it's really important to understand head hopping, understand the difference between third person limited and an omniscient narrator. Oh my goodness, my camera battery just died and I was really on a roll there. So I was talking about, what was I even talking about? Oh, understanding how to structure a multi-POV novel, why it's important to understand the difference between omniscient narration versus head hopping versus third person limited. So if you have any follow-up questions about any of these topics that I touched on today, especially the omniscient versus third person limited, please let me know down below. This video is probably going to be slightly longer than I was planning for this series, just because head hopping is something that needed a little bit more detail. I needed to go into depth a little bit, but if you have any follow-up questions, if you have any requests for content or other videos within this series, please let me know in the comments down below. If you are looking for editorial or design services, you can always come check out my company, Enchanted Ink Publishing. That is linked down below. We do cover design, editing, formatting. We do a ton of great stuff, and hopefully we can help you out with your book babies and with your projects. If you have any questions, again, leave them down below. I really appreciate when you guys let me know what you want to see on the channel, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, everybody.